Martin Seligman was the past president of the American Psychological Association. In 1999, he had an inauguration speech in which he said, basically, psychology's half-baked. We've baked the part about mental illness, about disease and damage, but the other side, the side of strengths, of what makes life worth living, is unbaked. And he famously quoted that they have 40,000 studies on depression and less than 400 on joy, making the point that everywhere you look, we seem to think that excellence is just the opposite of failure. So we study divorce to learn about marriage. We study unhappy customers to learn about the happy ones. We study disgruntled employees to learn how to engage employees. We study depression and neurosis and psychosis to learn about joy. Everywhere you look, we seem to think, in our society entirely, we learn to give people credit. We focus on their debt. Everywhere you look, we seem to think that good's the opposite of bad. And if you want good, you should study bad and invert it. We're wrong, he said. If you study bad and invert it, you get not bad. And his point was just it's different. Studying depression teaches you a lot about depression. Tells you nothing about joy. We learn from our mistakes. No, we learn about the characteristics of mistakes from mistakes. You learn nothing about success from studying failure. But of course, if you really wanted to see progress, you wouldn't look to organizations, and you wouldn't necessarily look to criminal justice system, or even the academic part of psychology. You'd look at, well, where would you look? When you start with schools? When you go to schools? Well, if you go look for schools, you go look for strengths-based schools. How many of you have kids, by the way, just as a sense of it? All right. You're going through, parent-teacher conferences right now, aren't you, many of you? And if you charge around looking for a strengths-based school, you know what you find? You find lots and lots and lots of really great teachers. Maybe they're not with your kids right now, I don't know. But you'll find lots of great teachers who instinctively apply this approach to strength building. They look for the strengths of kids, and then they try and capitalize on them. You'll find lots of teachers like that, and no schools. You'll find lots of teachers like that, and no curriculum. There's no explicitly strengths-based school trying over the course of years to discipline a child to figure out how to identify and apply their strengths. At least I didn't think there was, and I'd looked hard. I didn't tell you this, but I was signing today, and this chap came up and he said, you know what's wrong with our school system? We give people packed hard drives and no processor. And I thought that was a really good analogy. They know a lot of stuff, but they don't know how to think through how they can make their greatest contribution through all that stuff. I thought that was a nice analogy. Jennifer's leading this revolution in schools, and there's great work being done at Purnell, and there's great work maybe being done in places that your kids go to school or that you work. Maybe there's great work being done in your department here. Martin Seligman's certainly done great work. There's all sorts of change happening in the curriculum of Harvard and Princeton. There's work going on. And so like you, maybe not like you, I don't know. I'm one of those people that likes a bit of data to prove whether or not what you're doing is actually making any kind of difference at all. So these last 18 months, we've asked that question now repeatedly, 3 times a year, just to track how far this wonderful strengths revolution has come. We now know it makes such a difference in terms of performance, creativity, sustainability of the performance of a team or a company. So how far has this revolution come? All right, here's the most recent data. What do you think will help you be most successful, building your strengths or fixing weaknesses? After all this time and all this great work by all these different groups, here's where we are today. Yeah. Yes, it did go down. We're not living in a remedial world. We're living in an increasingly remedial world. If any of you are betting your career at Yahoo on leveraging your strengths, and I hope you are, just remember, you're in a minority, a growing minority, which means you're getting smaller. But whatever the situation is at Yahoo, just remember this. You need to hire, 10,000 odd more people in the next 3 or 4 years. Whatever people those are, just remember you are hiring them from this world. Whatever you believe, and I don't know why you chose to camp this afternoon, but you're hiring them from that world. You're going to get a lot more of these people, and it's worse overseas. This is the most strengths-focused nation in the world, perhaps because of 9/11, perhaps because of the Iraq War, Perhaps because of fear in this country, I don't know. But during times of fear and stress, we narrow and narrow and narrow our choices. In this case, to our weaknesses more and more. Is it just 9/11? Is it just the fear? I don't know, probably not. Maybe there's some beliefs in original sin that cause us to think about all of our frailties. Maybe there are some deep-seated myths that we continue to teach our children and are happy with ourselves for doing so. But just remember, for any of you that really believe the way to win at Yahoo is to leverage your strengths, most people don't agree with you. They may say they do when you talk to them, but deep down, they don't. But let's face it, none of you in this room are creative or innovative. And I'm going to finish this sentence, don't you worry. In every single aspect of your job. Not someone else's job, your job. There are some parts of your job right now where you're not very creative at all. Where your first idea is not only your best idea, it's your only idea. Now you keep talking, because that's what you do, but there's nothing there. There are other aspects of your job where you're hugely creative and innovative and inquisitive and show a lot of initiative and any other I word you can think of. There's some parts of your job where you're incredibly effective and resilient. Those are your areas of strength. So when anybody says people are our greatest asset, they don't mean that. They mean people's strengths are our greatest asset. Not much point Yahoo hiring a bunch of expensive people and then getting the positions where they don't get to play to their strengths much. Not because it makes them not as happy, although it might, but because they won't be very creative, innovative, inquisitive, show much resilience, and so forth. So if you wanted to boil this whole kind of grandiose strength movement, if you will, down to its most banal and practical level possible, it would be this. How could I take a room like this, where somewhere between 50 and 73% of you say, I, at Yahoo, am using my strengths at least once a week. How do I take you from once a week to most of the time? Because Yahoo can't win on once a week. You can't win on once a week. You're going to burn out on once a week. How do we go from once a week to most of the time? At some point in your career, you'll be using your strengths most of the time, and it just doesn't feel the same as at other points in your career. How do we help you get there, and how do we help you stay on that path? That's what, frankly, that's what this book was all about. It's also what this whole Simply Strengths thing was all about. It's how do you go from once a week to most of the time? And the funny thing about that is that no one, I don't know, Cheryl and Stuart notwithstanding, no one cares about this like you do. Here's a big surprise for you, maybe not. Yahoo's a bit ambivalent about you and your strengths. Yahoo likes your strengths if it helps you get a job done, and is a little annoyed with them if it takes you in a slightly different direction. And they should. The purpose of Yahoo is not to help you leverage your strengths. The purpose of Yahoo is to deliver something fabulous to somebody out there who's a customer or a client. So in a weird way, your strengths are a little tangential to the mission of Yahoo. I would argue not, but the only person who's really, really concerned about you becoming one of the 2 out of 10 who plays to their strengths for most of the time, or a little, as you saw from the data, a little less than 2 out of 10, is you. How do you, once you know that, how do you, in the face of a world that doesn't care, really, how do you each week make sure that you play to these strengthening activities a wee bit more next week than you do this week? How do you do that? Each week. Think about the most effective people you know here at Yahoo. Just think about them. I don't mean the top necessarily, the highest up the ladder. I mean the most effective people you work with. Don't they seem to spend a disproportionate amount of time doing activities that invigorate them? Well, just remember, if you've got anyone in mind right now, just remember that didn't happen by accident. That happened because incrementally, week by week, somehow they managed to make the best of their job into most of their job. That's a neat trick, isn't it? And some people manage to pull that off. So that's what this whole program is all about. That's what this whole book is all about. And I hope, as you can see, that our approach and Jennifer's approach is not to change the system. It's to start with you, or me, and try and figure out one person at a time. Let's fix Yahoo. Let's fix a Yahoo. Teach that one person how, in the face of a world that's ambivalent, how do you deliberately tilt the world toward the best of you? So you can not be happier, I mean, you may be happier, but so you can make a lasting and more sustainable contribution.